right, so we're going to open up a file called protection. And under protection, there's a couple things in here I want to point out. These fields right here are data entry fields. They're just numbers is all they are. These over here are also data entry numbers, but I want to protect everything else. I don't want somebody to be able to modify my formulas. So that is one aspect of this. So when you protect a sheet, we're going to protect the cells so that the formulas can't be modified, only the data entry points. And so you do this, you don't actually protect it in the word protection, you actually unprotect it. So what you do is you select the data that you want to allow people to type into. I'm going to hold my control key down. I'm going to select this other area. Those are the two areas I want to unprotect or to allow people to change. So then you go to the Home ribbon tab, click on the little arrow underneath the font, the alignment, or the number group. It doesn't matter. And it actually pops up this tab on the top called protection. So you see that every cell is technically locked by default. And so you have to unlock those cells. So if I click the unlock feature, that unlocks those highlighted areas. And then we say OK. Now there's two steps to this process. The first step is to unlock the cells. And the second step would be to protect the entire sheet. So if you come up to the Review tab, there's an option here called Protect Sheet or Protect Workbook. We're just going to protect this sheet. If I click Protect Sheet, it comes back and says, OK, you want to protect the sheet? And you say, OK, these options are the default option I'm going to choose. You could type in a password. Say OK. Verify your password. Say OK. And now the sheet's protected. So if I type this to 26, I can type in that one, 21. I can change these numbers in here, of course. I can also change this to 19%. I can change these values here. But the minute I try to change this formula, it won't let me type on the formula. It won't let me type anywhere, as a matter of fact. So if I come down to the white area, I can't type anywhere. So everything's protected except for the unprotected areas. And so that's how you protect cell references in that way. Now to unprotect it, you would simply click on the Unprotect sheet, and you click on that, and you says, oh, you can't unprotect this unless you have the password. So I have the password, I type it in, and say OK. And now it's unprotected again. Now, there is another way to protect the sheet. If you go to Home, if you highlight some cells like this, go to Home, over here there's a thing called Format. And under Format, there's an option that allows you to lock the cell this way and protect the sheet this way. So the way I showed you the first time was the traditional way, or the original way they created this protection feature. But later versions, they actually added these two features down here because maybe people couldn't find it or something. That's possible. That was the reason why. But they added it here to make it more visible in the menus themselves. So that is additional features that are in there. Now, let's go through and protect it again, but this time what I want to do is I'm going to hide the cells. So I want to be able to type in here, but when you click on here, I don't want them to be able to see the formula at all. So we're going to hide the formula. So what we want to do is we want to select the areas that we want to hide the formula for. There's formulas in all these areas. So you hold the control key down and you hide all the formula area. And now we're going to hide the formula. So you go to the little arrow underneath the font group. You go to the protection, and there's another option right underneath of that called hidden. And most people just don't understand that this is here. So if you click on that word hidden, what that simply means is it will hide the formula so you won't even be able to see the formulas. Then you say OK. And then you click on this data area here, and you can type in there, of course. But you notice here it doesn't actually work because I can still see the formula. So what did I do wrong? Where I went wrong is there's 2 steps to the process. The first step is to define the status of the cell, and the second step is to protect the entire sheet. So again, we go to Review, protect the sheet this way, or go to Home and protect the sheet this way. Either one's the same idea. Now, another thing I want to point out to you is that you don't necessarily have to use a password. I find that the passwords cost me more trouble in the long run, because if I put a password in here, then 2 years later when I open up the sheet, it comes back and asks me for the password. And I can't remember what password I put in there 2 years ago. So the idea is that sometimes it ends up coming back to bite me. So in this case, I'm not going to put a password at all, because half the time you're not really trying to keep people out of it. You're just trying to keep people from accidentally making a mistake. We're not going to put a password at all. And you just simply say, okay. It still protects the sheet. You can see it's all protected up here. Now, if I come over to this number here and I type in 23, over here I can type 61. But when I click on these formulas, you can't even see the formula in the formula bar. So that hides the formula, basically. And there are times when I've wanted to do that where I had formulas that calculated some values, and I didn't really want people to see how I created that number. I wanted to just keep all that hidden. So I always use this feature to accomplish that. So that is some methods you could use to accomplish it. Now, if you want to unprotect it, you hit the unprotection here, and it doesn't ask you for the password. So as far as I'm concerned, that if somebody knows how to do this, then go ahead and do it. That means they're knowledgeable enough, they're not going to be making mistakes. But if they don't know that much about Excel, or they're just sort of a data entry type person, then they won't even know where to go to make this change. So you can unprotect it this way. Now, another feature over here, which is called Allow Edit Ranges. In this sheet down here, for example, this is a bonus table, and I want people to make change to that, but only specific people. So I can actually password protect this range with a different password. So I can click on that range, say Edit Ranges, Allow Edit Ranges. I can add that range in there, and I can give it a name if I want. I'll call this bonus. And then there's the cell range that I chose. I can put in a password if I want. And then say OK. Verify that password. Say OK. And then you can protect the sheet here, it looks like. Or you just say OK and then protect at the top. So once you protect the sheet, again, in this case, you might want the password, but I won't put it in. So that means that if I come over here and I can change this one, I can't see my formulas anymore because they're hidden. I can change these numbers. But if I want to change these numbers, I click on it and start to change them. And it comes back and says, wait a minute, this area is password protected. So you can password protect different areas of the sheet for different people. Now this says, oh, you can't modify this area unless I have the password. So if I have the password, say OK. Now I can change the sheet. So maybe you might have different sections of the sheet where different people are responsible for it. And that way, the only person that can modify that area are the people that have the password for that particular area. So that may be something that you might want to use. Now we're going to show you something else, another feature. This is something I sort of discovered. I've got all my sheet all protected here, of course. But the problem is when I protect it, I can click in these cells here, but the problem is I can't see the formula. So that may actually be a little confusing for me, because if I can't see the formula, I might think something's wrong. So this next feature will allow you to actually lock the formulas or hide the formulas, but it will prevent you from even selecting the formula. So this is interesting because one person showed me this in a class, and I thought it was rather interesting how they, a strategy they use for doing this. So we're going to protect the sheet. I don't have to put a password if I don't want to. There's an option down here. And see, there's a lot of options down here. You can protect them from doing various things, of course. If you want to prevent them from inserting rows or deleting rows, things like this, you can put different features out there. These were the default settings that were set up. This first option says select locked cells. If I'd say, oh, I don't want them to even select a locked cell, I can turn that off, protect it, and now I can click in this area, but I can't even click anywhere else. I can't click anywhere because I said don't even allow them to select the locked cell. And so that's kind of interesting, that little interesting twist to all this. Now, a lot of times what I will do is I will actually unprotect like an area down below like this, something like this, because a lot of times if you're working on a sheet and everything's protected, you can't modify anything anywhere. Sometimes we like to come down here and put a couple formulas in and do a little thing. So a lot of times I will create like a little scratch area sort of below the data area and allow somebody to actually type in there, but then everything else would be protected. In that case, I can come over to my home and unlock these cells. So I unlock this area. So now when I protect it, review protection. Well, actually, I could turn this off or not turn it off, it doesn't matter. But that allows me to actually put in some stuff down here, see? So if I want to create some little formula, 3 times 2 or something like this, type some stuff in or do some little formulas down here, I can do that. But I wouldn't be able to modify this. I'd be able to modify these, but then I have this little scratch area I've created to allow people to kind of make little formulas, little notes and stuff like that. Otherwise, what I find people doing is they'll just end up creating a new sheet, and then they'll do their little stuff over here. Then they have to go back, and so it's just a little bit more of a hassle. So that's what I found to be useful. Okay, so that is a little bit about protection and how that works. So unprotected. Now we're going to go and look at file protection. And I'll come back and look at this here. And you see this whole chapter here talks about protection, cell protection. And I go through all those procedures we just went through. Then the file protection starts talking about password protecting the file to open, password file to modify, and there's several other features out here. So let's look at the file protection. So we take this particular file, we're going to say File, Save As, and you can either go to Browse or choose More options. Now, this put a different name on here just to put a different map there. And in this window, this Save As window, there's a little option in the corner down here, right next to the word Save. It's called Tools. If you click on that Tools, and you come down to where it says General Options. Now, I wish they'd rename this to say Password Protection, but they call it General Options. Maybe they were trying to hide the fact that this is how you protect a file. I don't know. But if you choose General Options, it comes up with this little General Options dialog box. And this says Password to Open. So I'm going to put in a password in here to open the file up. And I'm going to say OK. I'm going to verify my password. And then I'm going to save it. Now, in order to see if it's going to work or not, you have to close the file off and then reopen it again. So I'm going to go to File, Close, File, Open. Well, I can choose the file right here. That was the file I saved off. You open it up and it comes back and says, this file is password protected. You can't open the file unless you have the password. So if I don't have the password, I simply can't even open the file. But if I have the password, I can type the password, say OK, and open the file. Now, the good news is that it really works really well. The bad news is that we normally save these files out on the share folder, and the share folders are open to anybody. So anybody can modify a file that's out there. So you might want to password protect files on the share folder. The bad news is if makes them mad, you can just delete the file. So they still have the rights to delete the file. They may not have the rights to open the file, but they could delete the file still. So that's the bad news. Now this same feature is also available under File. It's under Info, and there's an option called Protect Workbook. And so the option here that says Encrypt with Password is the same feature we just showed you just now. The difference is that there's more options available in the interface that I showed you. Where this one here, they have the Encrypt with Password. Oh, this one here, the always open as read-only. They have these two options, but the other interface has several more. So we're going to go through and show you what these are too. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the old-fashioned way, which I'm going to simply go to File, Save As. This was the original way they designed it in Excel. So they just kept the feature there. They just added those other features. I'm going to get rid of the password, put in the password to modify, and say OK. Verify the password to modify. Close it, and reopen it. So now it comes back and asks me, it says, you can't open this file unless you have a password. But the password to modify says you can open it in a read-only mode. So if I have the password, I can modify the file. But if I open it in read-only mode, then I can't modify it. Unfortunately, it doesn't work because it does allow you to modify it. See it? So some things work and some things don't. So when I say the word read-only, it makes me think that this file is read-only and I can't make changes to it. But I can. See, I can change all that. But the good news is if I try to save the file, if I hit the word save right here, it comes back with an error message. So the file itself is not read-only, but the original file is read-only. So in other words, I can't overwrite the original file. So that is the best of both worlds because if I go in and make some changes to this file in the read-only mode, and then I try to save it, I can't save it. I'm going to lose my changes. So, but I could save it off as a different file name. So I could say at this point, well, I can't overwrite the original, but I could come along and say I can change the name to some other file name, and then I'm not going to lose the changes I made. So then we can reconcile the problem later. Find out who has the password or who has that file, and then you can say, well, let's replace that with this new file because I've made the changes. So you aren't going to lose the changes you made because it was read-only. And so that's how that works, basically. So we'll go File, Save As, go to Browse, General Options, and password modify is off. Oh, this is the new file. That's why, because it's a new file. It's not the original file. So the password is off. So this also allows you to do what's called create a backup, which will, every time it saves the file, it will make a backup of the file before it actually saves it. And so if there are some corruption, I'm not sure if I'm too happy about that because sometimes if we have a corrupt file, we save it like 10 times before we realize that it's corrupt. Something happens, you come back with an error, so you save it again. But the idea is that every time you save it, it will make a backup of it. And so it could give you that protection that you need. And it creates a file called BAK or some .BAK or something like that. This is read-only. It's read-only recommended. That means that every time you open up a file, though, it will actually come back and say that the file is read-only. You can't make changes to the file at all. but then there will be a message on top that says, allow you to do read-only, yes or no. You can modify it at that point. So it's not really a protection feature, just a warning for somebody. There's actually a new way to do that. If you look at over to the info, there's the read-only feature, there's the encryption feature, and there's several other protection features out here that are kind of external to the Excel. But this one here, it says mark as final, is another important one. This was added to the Office suite. This wasn't really an Excel feature. Mark the page as final. It says marked as final, but then it comes back to the top. Every time you open the file up, it's in a final state. And if you want to modify, you just hit the word edit anyways. The purpose of this was that this file is considered permanent or a completed file, and I don't want to make any changes to it. So it's sort of a protection for you so that every time you open the file, it always puts it in a read-only mode. And then if you do want to make changes to it, you have to take an action to make that change. It's not going to be an accidental thing. So sometimes we accidentally make changes to a file, and then we save it not thinking about it, and then we realize we shouldn't have saved it. So this is just a little semi-protection feature that might be useful. Okay, so what we did was we talked about the password protection. I went into all the different features, the read-only, the always to do as a backup, mark as final. You can also hide sheets. That's kind of an interesting thing. Protect sheets, encrypt with password, and so these are some of those features I mentioned earlier. And so another protection feature that I've seen people use is when they hide sheet. Now, this isn't really a protection feature, but I find it to be pretty useful. If you right-click on any sheet and you choose hide, you can hide a sheet. And so I can hide these sheets if I wanted to. And I've had a lot of people, and what people do is they would write a formula up here, and the formula would actually pull data from this hidden sheets. And so a lot of people get really confused about where's it getting this data from? I don't even see these sheets anymore. See, so they would hide the sheet, they put the formulas on the secondary sheets, and then they would, if they want to restore it, you just right-click and unhide it. And so I think that a lot of people don't realize. I use that for other things, like for documentation, and like if I have to do a sheet and somebody sends me an email, I will select the email and paste it into a blank sheet and then hide the sheet when I'm done. So I know the procedures are there if I needed them. I also use it for like invoice instructions and stuff like that. But I've had a lot of people come to me before with confused because they look at their sheet and the formulas are referencing some field somewhere, but they don't know where it is. And they're all hidden down here. So I find a lot of people use that just for purposes of just kind of trying to hide things or some kind of protection, but it's not really a protection. You can open it up like this. But a lot of people don't even know that it's there. When you hide a column, you kind of know that the column's hidden because there's a letter missing. But the sheets, you just don't even know that there's something missing down there at all.